everyone has heard about probiotics for the gut. You've heard about Danone and Actimel talking about good bacteria. So everyone associates it often with health benefits, but the science itself does say that just by ingesting microbes, you will have health benefits. When they're implemented incorrectly, probiotics could actually...
Sam and Kit Wallen-Russell, who really took skincare into their own hands.
Twin brothers from the UK who are taking the skincare industry by storm.
Sam is a nuclear astrophysicist, and Kit is a geophysicist and author.
A Notre Dame grad and his twin brother are looking to revolutionize skin health.
The two launched a 2-year intensive research study.
Two very smart guys who knew all about bad skin at a very early age.
That woman at the end was our mum, and really she's the face which launched 1,000 questions for us.
I've seen the movie, so replace Sam in his astrophysicist world. Okay, cool. There we go. Right. Much ado about nothing. Right, Kit. The last time we talked, we were talking about entropy, and then I think more so the influencing factors for a healthy skin microbiome. Do you want to give us a quick recap on what they are, and then we'll kick on for this episode?
Yeah. So again, really quick recap of the bigger picture. There's a chronic disease epidemic going on in the Western world. A lot of the research is linking a catastrophic biodiversity loss, which we've gone into on our microbiome, to this chronic disease epidemic. So we're starting to try and find ways of increasing the biodiversity of the microbiome to maybe roll back and fight back against these diseases in the Western world. So the last podcast was linking entropy physics and ecosystem science, or the microbiome, just to show why biodiversity is so important for an ecosystem, or why it's currently the only reliable indicator of health of the skin microbiome.
That is a beautiful summary, mate. So then I think when me and Sam talked last as well, we then focused on a topic of probiotics. We call to go on to that one then and see how that relates to basically the bigger picture of trying to have a healthy skin microbiome.
Yeah. Fantastic.
So then let's kick off first. What are probiotics? I think would be the first question.
That's a good point. The one bit I forgot to say, Adam, which you probably asked me, was there were, I think last time we mentioned 4 main ways which had been talked about in the science about how to increase the biodiversity of the microbiome. And one was probiotics, the other was prebiotics, postbiotics, and then the 4th thing we mentioned was creating the right conditions on the skin microbiome for the biodiversity to thrive. So those were the 4 main ways in the research which were touted as ways of increasing the microbiome biodiversity. I think this episode, let's start with probiotics, go into what it is first, and then see whether it's any good at doing that.
There we go. Back to you, mate. What are probiotics then? Let's kick on from
there. Probiotics. So the official definition, I'll get the official definition up from...
Where's it from, Kit?
The World Health Organization has an official...
Oh, it is the World Health Organization.
Yeah, it's what we quoted in our papers about probiotics.
Yeah.
I think you need to get up from Facebook, don't you? From Jill from Facebook.
What's that?
I'm joking. Yeah, you can find an answer to anything you want these days from anywhere, but it's all about the source, isn't it?
Jill, like that.
Not your Jill, Sam. A different one.
Yeah, before you get eggy. Jill. Right. So the World Health Organization defines the term probiotics as living microorganisms which, when administered in adequate amounts, confer a health effect on the host. So that's the official definition. So the idea, in a nutshell, is artificially introducing microbes, living microbes, to, say, the skin or the gut, to try and have some beneficial effect on either of those.
Okay. let's go back one. What are microbes? What's your definition of a microbe?
Good. So yeah, let's recap what a microbe is. But microbes are living organisms which live in and on our bodies in the microbiome. And we said before, the microbiome exists in our gut, in cavities like our nose, our mouth, and on all over our skin as well. But microbes, the living things which are microbes, are just bacteria, fungi, viruses, things like archaea and mites. Those are all different types of the living little organisms which live in and on our bodies.
What purpose do they serve, or what's their goal in life? What are they doing? Is it just simply to exist, and we as a host, are we a host? Do we act as that for them?
I like that.
That's a good question.
Oh, that's a really good question, because again, it enters into philosophical realms at one point as well. Because are they parasites, or are they using us, or are they acting as some kind of beneficial barrier for us, or are they having beneficial effects for us?
Exactly.
And often, it's a bit like any relationship. They always call the relationship between microbes and us often symbiotic, which means we both benefit. So, for example, the big thing we talk about is microbes are incredibly important for a number of reasons. They help our immune system. They're incredibly beneficial for our health. And when we have a healthy microbiome, which is just the collection of microbes, they protect us against disease. But then obviously they are there just like us as organisms wanting to survive. So they gain benefits from us as well. They have an ecological niche in which they can survive and thrive. It's a two-way interaction.
Okay, that makes sense. When previously you just mentioned about like artificially introducing microbes to the skin or the gut. When we say introducing them, are these things live? Like, my first question would be, where are we getting them from? Number one, how do you extract a microbe from point A and put it on to point B, which is someone's skin, for example? Are they live? Are they dormant? Are they fermented? I think I've seen fermented that goes into the gut.
Another good question.
Really good one. So
which could have, if I were to write an essay on that, it could have about 10 different sections.
So, yeah.
Well, as is every topic we talk about, Kit. But your job is to condense it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
that's your job, Kit.
Throws in the deep end.
But I'm not going to say much because I don't.
At the deep end. Right, Sam, I'll let you talk now. You go.
Well, I was just going to bring it back to you because you're the expert, the research expert. So for the microbes, go back to the WHO definition. The WHO, the
World Health Organization.
Yeah, so it said that probiotics were, if you ate something where you administer, say it again, Kit.
The definition.
Yeah.
It says living microorganisms which, when administered in adequate amounts, confer a health effect on the host.
Yeah, so they're saying it should confer a health effect. So then, Adam, what was your question?
Live, dormant, or fermented? How do we extract them? How do we get them onto the body?
That's a good question. Well, the answer is in that definition. So for a probiotic to be actually a probiotic, it has to be living. So fermented means often things like processes which fermentation processes often can eliminate microbes. So what we want is we just want live microbes.
Okay.
So when you say things like dormant as well, I'm not really sure about that term. Again, it sounds like a little bit of a marketing term, which means that the microbe may not actually be alive, but I'll have to check that one for you, Adam. But that's a good question. So basically, in this episode, we're just dealing with live microbes purely.
Go. Where are we getting them from? Where are you getting these live microbes from?
Well, number of ways of doing it. You can take them from someone else's skin.
Which I'm guessing we're not doing.
You could do. I mean, the idea in the gut, what they do sometimes, the idea of probiotics came from the gut, because the gut is about, I don't know, 30 years ahead of the skin microbiome in research terms. Everyone knows about the gut microbiome. And what they do sometimes, it's called a fecal transplant for people. So they actually take a lot of the microbes from someone's poo who's healthy. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they give it to someone who has an unhealthy gut. The idea really was that you have this incredibly diverse ecosystem, and taking a wide range of microbes, say from someone's fecal matter, who's healthy, and then giving it to someone who is supposedly unhealthy or has gut problems, would sort out quite a lot of their problems. And that, again, that's an idea which could be good and it could be really beneficial, but then it has some downsides as well.
Well, it could be very beneficial. I mean, like,
no, it could be that way specifically. So what happens a lot though, Adam, is in the gut, again, we'll start with the grounding of the gut. What people take sometimes is they take probiotics where it's just one type or one strain of microbe. Yeah. Whereas the good thing about the fecal matter one is that you're having a wide variety of microbes, so you're much more likely to get a more biodiverse microbiome from taking a wider variety of microbes instead of just one species.
Because like you said previously, right, if we were just to introduce one by itself, then that kind of would defeat the purpose of what you want, which is variability, I guess.
But the problem is, again, I've got examples where introducing just one can revolutionize an ecosystem. But again, we'll have to talk about that further down the line. So I think, firstly, what we should talk about really is probiotics in the gut has been the science in the gut. Everyone has heard about probiotics for the gut. You've heard about Danone and Actimel talking about good bacteria, stuff like that, taking your good bacteria. So everyone associates it often with health benefits, but the science itself doesn't always say that just by ingesting microbes, you will have health benefits. You have to, from what we've seen in our research, actually, what you have to do is you need to take the right amount of the right types of microbes for it to have a beneficial effect. And that's going to be different on every person. So it's very hard to
play God.
To play God. It is very hard to play God.
You've just mentioned the right types of microbes. Whenever I've ever talked to you guys over the years, you've always said I think we mentioned earlier in previous episodes around good and bad microbes and how the industry tends to advertise those. My understanding from previously talking to you guys is that there isn't good and bad, and that the idea is just to have as many of different of species as possible. But you've just said the right species. So does that correlate to what we previously said, or is there a little bit of a stipulation there?
Good point. But when I said the right species, I didn't mean like necessarily good bacteria. What I meant was, say, for example, using the analogy, I'll use an analogy which I use a lot. The wolves in Yellowstone Park. So I can't remember when it was, in the 1900s, the wolves were either exterminated or they died out in Yellowstone Park. Yeah, I can't remember whether they were killed off. But anyway, what happened was in the years after that, the park became utterly destroyed and it was described as some of the worst grazeland in the Western world because it was just so unhealthy. And the park rangers were sitting there like twirling their hair, thinking, oh my God, what do we do? How do we get the park back to what it was and back to being this flourishing biodiverse ecosystem? And finally, they came up with this plan, and that was to reintroduce the wolves, which had died out. And wolves are obviously an apex predator, so they're very important in the ecosystem. So the park rangers looked at the number of wolves which were in the park when it was healthy. And I can't remember how many of that was. It ranged between, I think, 40 and something. But anyway, they introduced something like 30 wolves back to the park, or a number which grew up to 30 wolves back to the park, because they knew the exact numbers of wolves which were good for the park. And this had astonishing effects. Like no one could ever have predicted what would happen to Yellowstone Park. You had rivers changed direction just because they brought the wolves back. You had animal populations which had nearly died out, flourished. The elk populations which had exploded because there were no predators to eat these fat elks. They were kept in tow, and as a result, things like overgrazing didn't happen. So loads of grassland grew back, and then even weird things cascading down the whole food chain, like the heights of shrubs grew taller, beaver dams grew bigger, things like this. All of these changes, which in the last couple of episodes we talked about, which are kind of non-linear changes. I don't know if we've talked about this, which you can't predict, happen because of one intervention bringing one species back to the system.
So this is that is what's the word? An example of probiotics in a large ecosystem, and that's when it works well. That's when it works right. So you're adding one species back, and they knew the amount that would be good for it. They didn't just swamp it. They didn't just drop 3,000 wolves on the place and just said, yeah, wolves will do with 3,000 wolves. They understood the park. They saw what worked before, and then they put a certain amount of wolves back of one species, and it utterly transformed it. But the main thing here is that they understood what would work in the ecosystem, how many to put, and so the benefits before the wolves were reintroduced, the elk, who normally in the ecosystem now, the elk are just a normal part of the ecosystem. They're not damaging to it. But when the wolves were taken away or died out, the elk actually became very damaging to the ecosystem. So before that species was neutral or good for the ecosystem, but then they actually became very bad for the ecosystem after it. So when we talk about good or bad microbes, is that it doesn't give the whole story. It's quite a nice way to describe it, and for marketing they use it a lot, but it doesn't give the whole story in any way, because depending on the situation, whether you have a strong ecosystem or a weak ecosystem, different microbes or different species of anything can behave in completely different ways.
I think there's two main points there. The first main point about the wolves being reintroduced into Yellowstone Park, that's an analogy for probiotics. So probiotics, in my head, really the definition is just the artificial introduction of a species to an ecosystem, here the wolves. So for example, that's why we say that in the future probiotics could be the most incredible solution, because as we've seen with Yellowstone Park, it transformed the landscape. So it's a bit like, Adam, say you had acne on your face. We're going to relate that to the unhealthy Yellowstone Park ecosystem, and the equivalent of knowing, say for example, you had a supposed predator on your skin which had died out, a bit like the wolves. If we knew the exact amount on your cheeks, on your skin there, and the exact type to put back in, and it transformed your acne, that's the same thing which has happened in Yellowstone Park. So firstly, probiotics has incredible future potential. So that's the first point Yellowstone Park shows. But at the moment, we can't do it like Yellowstone Park for many reasons we'll go into later. And the second point Sam talked about, I know you're itching to ask a question, Adam, and I'm going on. But the second point Sam was talking about there was that examples like Yellowstone Park can also show us that the idea of good and bad microbes is actually a bit of a myth as well.
My first question was, over what period of time do you know when they introduced the 30 or so wolves? How long did they until they start to see a recovery in the ecosystem?
Good question. I'll go into my paper which found this out. So
right. And then whilst you're doing that, I think what you said just completely explains why trying to play God with individual microbes, whatever it is just so hard on the human body. And I mentioned it previously, right? How I guess these ecosystems have been growing over thousands, I don't know how long would you say that ecosystem, for example, in Yellowstone Park has taken to get to the point that it was before the wolves got to destroy it. But point is, it's a long time, right? And then and that took time to get it to that, maybe you could argue is that perfect state or the close to perfect state, then something gets removed. But you could quite easily quantify, give or take, how many wolves there were. So when they were removed, you can then go, great, we can add them back in, right? It's fairly easy to do. But I guess when you start then looking at the human microbiome, skin microbiome, and I've got then to try and count those numbers and to understand the right level or whatever it is too much right now, I guess. Is that fair?
There's so many factors here. Like you say, there's a sort of a measuring problem. There's the problem with actually knowing, like the park rangers, relating it back to Yellowstone, the park rangers understood what was healthy for the system, and they realized that the wolves not being there was not healthy. So they realized, well, which paid off, we just add the wolves back. So what we would need to know about every single, say we're treating someone's skin microbiome, we'd need to know on that person's skin microbiome, what's healthy for them, what's missing in what numbers, and what the effect would have to be. And this differs depending from person to person. So our understanding of the skin microbiome and the microbiome in general really is not at the point where we can do that. And also, when we think about a lot of the solutions that are used as probiotics, they're a one size fits all solution. Whereas we don't go to the Amazon and go, there's a part of the Amazon that isn't flourishing, let's add some wolves to it, because that's basically what we do for probiotics in our daily life. Probiotics are they're sort of marketed as having health benefits across the board universally, but every person who drinks them or uses them on their skin has a different microbiome, and so it's not a universal health benefit. It might help one person, but it could also damage and cause adverse health effects to you. So we got to be careful when talking about, and that's why when they're marketed as scientific, we got to be careful about that. And as Kit's saying, the research isn't on a level to be able to say that. And it's actually, Kit, hasn't they been removed from packaging in Europe or something, or what happened?
Well, I think because, as we said, the research is inconclusive, really. Probiotics have been linked to beneficial health effects on the skin and in the gut. But then also on the flip side, also there's loads of questions like the ones we're raising about them. And sometimes they've been linked to health problems as well. So let me just find in our paper. Oh yeah, so in Europe, the European Food Safety Association banned the sale of any product named probiotic because it is an unauthorized health claim. So according to the EU guidelines, the term probiotic implies a health benefit by default. So if these products are just implying, just because they have live microbes, they give a health benefit, the EU Food Safety Authority, or whatever it's called, is saying that if it doesn't have the science to back that up, it can't use the name probiotic, which I think is very fair, because it has to.
I think it's fair also, right? Because that's a very sweeping statement. You've got to be specific, it seems like, when it comes to these things.
Exactly.
My other question was going to be, however, you mentioned the human fecal matter has of a healthy human, or a human with a healthy microbiome, could be used if you just introduce a lot of different species. Does that not help more often than not, or no? And again, it depends per person.
It could do. Again, I would need to read more research on this, because that's an area which I haven't really read much of, one of the few areas. But again, I mean, using the wolves in Yellowstone Park analogy, if you essentially went back in time to when Yellowstone Park was very healthy, cut out a big bit of land and then supplanted it into the ecosystem there, the unhealthy ecosystem, I'm sure that could have some health benefits. But then also, one, you're not sure how long those health benefits would last, and two, if you are adding a few of the wrong numbers, it may not be that beneficial. But
well, yeah, I mean, again, we don't know. It might be good for one system, not good for another. So
yeah, we don't know. It depends. Again, I think it depends on the person. But if you do have a wider range of microbes or organisms, that could be beneficial.
it sounds on the face of it, it sounds better than just swamping it with one type of microbe because
you're getting maybe a bit more of a better balance there. So I feel it could have some benefits depending on the
thing with probiotics now is it's only, like you're saying, there's only one type or so, but it's also the amount too. You sort of you're swamping your microbiome with this one type of microbe, which again we don't really know what the benefits are depending on person to person, or not benefit. We don't know what the actual health effects are.
When I drink a maybe not kombucha is the right one, but there's obviously drinks, right? Probiotic drinks. You're saying to me they've only got like 1 or 2 species in there, because I think what the marketing says is there's like millions of bacteria or whatever it is, millions of microbes in this bottle. But is the point that they're all from the same species and they're not varied?
No, I'm not sure about kombucha because that's like what's the word, fermented and brewed, isn't it? So like yogurt in some ways. Again, I'm not sure how many different types there are, can be better than taking, say, just a probiotic itself. So if you take like a probiotic capsule that has 1 or 2 species in, to me, that unless you know fully what your healthy microbiome looks like and that adding that amount of species would be good, that sounds like a bad idea to me. But ones that are sort of naturally fermented or naturally what's the word when you make yogurt? I can't remember the word. What did you say?
Pasteurized? I don't know.
Not pasteurized. I can't remember the word. But when you cultured, that's it. I think naturally cultured bacteria is you do grow sort of different types of bacteria, so that could be better. So there's more different types. But again, we don't know. But to me, a one size fits all solution
doesn't work.
Isn't going to work.
Yeah. So my
kombucha just has a variety of microbes in it. There's a study here in the journal from MDPI, which we publish with a lot, called Nutrients, which says they identified 200 microbial species in kombucha.
Right. Yeah. Because
again, that's only one study, but kombucha has a variety of it. So things, fermented drinks like that, are on the whole probably better than adding
and
a large amount of one type.
And we all had a gentleman's agreement at the start of this episode to say we're not going to talk about fermented, right? We're talking about live. And that was my fault for bringing that in, but am I correct in saying that?
Oh, that was well, I think that was more like fermented microbes. Kit knows more about that, and we can come on to it. But
but it depends really. I mean,
in probiotic skincare, when we are saying probiotic is a live species, in a lot of, or some, maybe a lot of is the right word, in a lot of probiotic skincare, because of the nature of skincare that it has to be preserved, which means kill bacteria and microbes. A lot of probiotic skincare doesn't contain live microbes, so it can't call itself probiotic, which a lot of people still call it probiotic. But then
so often it contains things like lysates, which are the byproducts of the fermentation process. So obviously the fermentation process has a huge amount of live microbes in it.
But like you were Kit,
that's how fermentation works. So if you actually have things like kombucha, is just, I think, the fermentation product still with some of the live microbes in it.
Let's go to the crux though, because you're saying that some skincare products are using or a lot, because they have to preserve it. Or skincare has to pass certain preservation things that kills microbes. So if you're saying you've got probiotic skincare that's preserved for a shelf life that kills all microbes, then those microbes aren't live. And so the word probiotics there, one, isn't right, and two, it's being used because people associate it with a health benefit. So there's a few things to go through there, but maybe we can come up.
That's why I said on this topic you can do like 4 or 5 podcasts.
Yeah, let's leave that one. I think that definitely would be next time around. But the original question I asked you, Kit, was loaded. So number one, I just wanted to make sure if you were going to be pooing on me or not recently or soon. Sounds like no. So far it sounds like no. So I'm happy there. But to answer the wider question, which we've talked about probiotics, right? And again, if you're thinking about anyone listening to this and they might not be happy with the way their skin looks, maybe, or they want to improve their health in the skin, and probiotics as a topic, as an influential factor, as a potential influential factor.
Yeah.
Right now, it sounds like it's not there. Do you agree with that, or you disagree?
Now that's a good place to summarize. Actually, good point. So yeah, I think the first thing to say is that probiotics as a way of increasing the biodiversity, just like it did in Yellowstone Park, is an idea which has incredible future potential. It could be.
Well, I wouldn't. Yeah, it does. There's a potential for it. Yeah, but there's many downsides, aren't there, that you need to be careful of.
Yes, but firstly, hold on. That's the point of a summary. Firstly, the first point is it has incredible future potential. Hear that word, Sam? Future.
Yeah.
So we've got future potential because of the example we explained about Yellowstone Park. But here comes the caveat. Because of our current knowledge of the skin microbiome, which is virtually unique on every person and is very, very different across different body sites, no one knows exactly what type of microbe and how many of them to put on someone's skin to rebalance it and increase its biodiversity at the moment. And that is the biggest problem at the moment. So potentially, as a lot of the research is pointing towards, potentially probiotics could actually decrease biodiversity when they're implemented incorrectly, as they are often at the moment.
You need to be held to account, Kit.
Healthy. Kit, if you were just a microbe by yourself, there'll be nothing to keep you in check, right? Sam's just another microbe trying to
biodiversity is
so right. You're so right. That's
if you were on your own, you'd be the elk, and you
need all these interactions.
I love the stupid analogies that we come up with.
I thought I like that one. It was a good one because it's true, and that's also how they work.
I'm going to say my first question, I think, next time. So I actually thought it was cool. It was a good topic. The next episode we do, like Kit's saying, we then focus, I'm going to call it 9B now, and we have to adjust the ones below. But we're going to say pre and post biotics then, right? Or would you even have an episode for pre and an episode for post? But you guys choose. I don't care. But my first question would then be, what is the difference between pre and post? I think that'd be quite a cool one to understand. What
that's a good one. I think let's do the next one on pre and post.
Yeah.
We can talk about them in a similar sentence because they're similar. And they originate from the gut.